All right. Good evening, everyone. And what was that? Ooh. I love it. I love the enthusiasm. It's a Wednesday night. Why not? Let's get a bit of ooh going. My name is Eric, and I'm one of the managers on the customer support team at Intercom, and also a semi-professional yapper, which is why I think I was invited to MC tonight's proceedings. So first off, you're all very welcome along to this fantastic space for this Fin and Instant.io meetup. We're going to have kind of a conversation between Declan, who is the VP of Support at Intercom, who built Fin, and also Lawrence, who is one of the founding engineers at Instant.io. I hope I got that right. Yep. Excellent. And in a week where Ireland and England are going to be against each other in Twickenham on Saturday, it's nice to see a bit of conviviality between an Irishman and an Englishman. But without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to the stars of the show, Declan and Lawrence.
Thank you, Eric, for that wonderful introduction. Yapper, is that how you describe yourself? Very apt skill for tonight. Now on to another yapper. So firstly, I want to read out something I read earlier today that kind of slightly controversial, but I actually think is really, really hitting the truth. And it was that companies that customers trust most aren't the ones that never fail. They're the ones that respond well when they do. And if you think about it, it sounds slightly odd, but it is actually the truth. If you think about who you really trust, it's where people have looked after you when something has gone wrong and when something has failed. So keep that in the back of the mind. This is an important topic. So firstly, good evening to everyone, and thank you for spending time with us this evening. I know your time is valuable. Making a decision to come and spend it with myself and Lawrence, we appreciate it. So thank you for that. I think, as I'm acknowledging, incidents are absolutely inevitable, and every company in the room here will experience them at some stage or other. But it's not that customers remember the failure per se, but they will remember how you led through it and how you responded to it. That's what they will ultimately remember. So tonight isn't about presenting a perfect playbook, because I think the reality is there isn't a perfect playbook. It's about leadership under pressure. It's about communication when information is incomplete. And it's about how AI is changing the way we respond. And it's not by replacing humans, which is the common kind of talk track around AI, but it's by reducing the cognitive load that you're placing on leaders and your support engineers, so that they can think clearly when it matters most, like when actually an incident is occurring. As Eric said, I lead customer support at Intercom. And during incidents, there's probably three things that I really focus on. It's clarity, consistency, and protecting customer trust, with the third piece being really what's top of mind from a customer service, customer support point of view. How are you maintaining and hopefully even improving trust in terms of how you respond when incidents occur? So tonight we're going to explore what actually works, what doesn't, and what's changing in an AI-first world. But before we dive in, I'd like to welcome Lawrence Jones from Instant.io. Lawrence has been at the forefront of how teams detect, manage, and learn from incidents across companies and across scale. So Lawrence, maybe give a little bit of introduction around yourself, your history, and a little bit about Instant.io, and then we'll dive into the questions.
Great. Well, thank you for having me. So I work at a company called Instant.io. For those of you who haven't heard of it, we help other companies respond when things go wrong. So I'm being kind of deliberately general there, and that's because for us, an incident can range anything from honestly, laptops have been stolen from the office, or I don't know, the site has gone down, to something much kind of more messy organizationally. So if you think fintech and loads of regulatory issues that crop up when you have breaches or things like that. All of that stuff is what you would normally use our system to try and help you respond with. So we have a couple of components. We have our on-call system, which is what actually notifies you when things go wrong. If you're familiar with PagerDuty or things like that, we have a system that does something very similar. We make your phone make a loud noise, probably when you don't want it to, very late at night. But then you end up in our system and actually in kind of the meat of an incident, which is where you're working with the rest of the people across your organization and trying to do what we were just saying just there, which is kind of try and, in even the worst of situations, end up shepherding your customers to a place where hopefully you haven't broken this trust, but you've worked with them to build something even more material. And for the past year and a half, I've been leading up AI Incident IO. So at the moment, we're building this tool that we call AI SRE. The idea of it is that kind of much like Finn with all of the AI automations that you can get out of Intercom, AI SRE is meant to turn up at the start of the incident, and it will go looking through all of your metrics, logs, traces. It will look at every incident that you've ever had before that kind of looks like this one. It will look at all the mistakes that you made, and then it will gather together all the things that you think are a good idea to do in an incident like this, and it will try and present back to you, this is what we think is going wrong. We think you fix it like this. Please remember to notify your DPO or do the thing that you forgot to do last time. So I've been working on that for a year and a half. I think we're going to go through a couple of questions more about like incident response in general. So probably useful to say, I used to work at a company called Go Cardless. I was a principal site reliability engineer there. So I led up a lot of their infrastructure teams. Go Cardless is a payment processing company. So kind of when that stuff goes wrong, you end up in those messy fintech regulatory incidents I mentioned before. But also all of your customers come to you because none of their customers can now take payments. And that's kind of your job. So they're very high pressured situations that can get kind of nasty. And for some reason, that's why I then ended up at Incident IO, because it turns out I actually quite like those situations and get a bit of a buzz from it. So yeah, that's my intro, I think.
Thanks, Lawrence. That's really, really insightful. You know, I think your history is really interesting. I'd love to delve in more at another stage. We acknowledge that incidents happen, but what does excellent incident leadership really look like from your perspective?
So I think it goes back to what you were saying before, I think, which is when an incident occurs, you have a couple of different concerns that are running through your head. Firstly, you need to actually deal with your own organization. So it doesn't work if something has gone wrong and you have various different people across the company who are all responding separately without communicating with one another and not even knowing maybe that someone else is on it. So you need kind of your coordination internally within the company first to make sure that an incident is actually going to go right. I see this kind of like, it's kind of a morbid, but you know, when you're on an airplane and they're like, you know, if the oxygen masks come down, put yours on first. That's what you need to do in an incident. You need to make sure that your team is able to coordinate effectively so that they can deal with the problem at hand. As soon as you've got that actually sorted, it's understanding what is going on. It's understanding what the impact of the incident is and how your customers are affected. And then like a huge part of incident response is doing what you're saying, which is bringing your customers with you through what is this? How does it impact me? How should I think about this? When are you going to, I don't know, be back up? What do I need to do to fix this? And for us anyway, that means a continual focus on the coordination internally, ensuring that you're getting communications to people that are both accurate, timely, and like regular, so that they know you haven't just gone to sleep or left them in the dark. And then it comes closing the incident at the end, right? So it's like, when you finally figured out how this happened, hopefully you're running postmortems and debriefs internally. You want to be figuring out how you can try and make sure that, at least for this specific type of incident, you don't get hit by it again, maybe next week. And then sharing those learnings in whichever way you possibly can with your customers, so that you can kind of turn what is a bad situation where you could very easily lose customer trust into something where they learn more about how you work and they are more convinced that you care about them than maybe they were before.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like, roles and responsibilities are really important when it comes to excellent leadership. You know, having a defined process that's well tried and tested is really important as well. And also, you know, making sure that you're allowing people to focus in the right way. So, you know, having a clear delineation between the team that are really, you know, focused on restoring the service and doing all the technical hard work and lift. You have another team who are then, you know, focus on customer communication, how you're engaging with your customers, building up that trust. And then also having someone who's, you know, charged with actually communicating with the rest of the business, like what's going on, what's the impact from an overall business point of view. So, you know, that for me is excellent leadership, where you have those clearly defined roles, delineation of what people are responsible for, and you got a well tried and tested process as well. And I know we'll probably talk about it later on. I'd love if you could tell us about an incident that changed how you lead from an incident point of view, and I'll share a couple as well afterwards, but I'll give you the mic first.
Yeah, I think I've had far too many of these. I think the one that comes to mind, when I was joining Incident, like one thing that was running through my head was, if I'm going to join this company and we're going to build this product that will help people run incidents, I thought it was a really good opportunity for me to take everything that I had learned and everything that I helped other people at Go Cardless run incidents with, and kind of work that into the product so that other people could avoid making the same mistakes or could by default do the right thing, where before that was much harder. One of the largest incidents that I've ever been involved in was at Go Carlos, where there was this travel company who were using us for their payment processing, and that company happened to go bankrupt. But it happened kind of in a very cloak and dagger way, where because they were so large and they have government insurance, and there was so much money held up in kind of these recurring payments that we hadn't fully collected, it meant that the government were in negotiations with them on whether or not they would go through a buyout and things like that. And you might think that this doesn't impact a payment provider, but we were actually on the hook for all the money that had been taken. So if at any point all these people had decided to charge back their payments, that would have been $1 billion hole in our bank account, which we didn't have $1 billion hanging around. No one really does. So that was kind of an example of an existential threat to the company. And when I think about incidents and kind of good incident response, I kind of think about it as a bit of your company's immune system in that way. So if you have this existential threat that's about to rock the whole company, you need to figure out how to deal with it. Suddenly you're putting a load of pressure on your incident response system, and you start needing the stuff that we were talking about earlier, like the coordination. You start needing to this is no longer just an incident that will go on for half a day or something like that. I think it ran for about 2 weeks, so through weekends, and we had people there all the time trying to figure out how we were going to send batches of hundreds of millions of pounds of payments to people at various different times. And in that incident, what we actually had to do to try and make sure that it was going to work is you end up building up sub-teams. So you end up with this incident response process, and it grows organically from the first people who, unfortunately for them, I found them at 5 a.m. in a room kind of sweating and kind of upset with a whiteboard that looked a bit crazy with large sums of money moving from various bits. And we just went, look, right, you got to stop, go home, we'll take over. And then you start building into actually what the incident response process is, where you end up with a lead, and then you start engaging with your executives, and then you start pulling in people across the business, and then you need structure, and you need to be communicating with people in the right way. And gradually you end up bubbling out, and you end up with these streams of people who are dealing with different parts of the incident, who all have different goals, but then you need a coordination level in the middle who can collate all of this information and make sure that the people who are really making the decisions, honestly at this point, the board of the company and some government advisors, are actually in the loop to make sure that you're doing the right thing. And I think over the course of the incident, it ended up involving, I think, maybe 50 or 60 people across Go Carlos at various different times. And all the stuff that I learned from that was when I looked at incident when I was first joining and went, this is a very nascent, small product, I was I'd love to turn up and grow this thing into a thing that can actually support an incident of that scale. And nowadays, I think the record for the number of people we've had on an incident bridge call is some 1,000 something, which I would never recommend. Don't do that. I'm not even sure if Zoom supports that. I don't know what they were doing, but nowadays that's the product that we're trying to build, something that can give you the guardrails so that you can actually run this stuff at the scale that some people need to, without the whole organization kind of falling apart under the pressure.
Very good. Yeah, my example is really early in my career, I kind of realized that incidents are very stressful, whether it's the technical team, the support team. And I used to always try and alleviate the pressure a little bit by kind of saying, look, it's not life and death, right? And generally for a lot of the services we were supporting, it wasn't life and death. But then all of a sudden I began to support services that actually were life and death. And that changed my perspective. So an example was running a network for an A&E hospital system where if A&E went off the air, it was potentially life and death if they lost their services. And then the other very clear example was, and I was sharing with Lawrence earlier today, I was at a personal event and I got paged out, and I had this guy on the phone basically saying, I'm ringing you from the Air Traffic Control Centre in the west of Ireland. We normally have 4 data centres into this location. 2 are down already. If another one goes down, we're down to 1 circuit. If that circuit goes down, planes fall out of the sky. And, what are you going to do about it? So it brought home to me very sharply, when an incident occurs, you got to really understand what's the impact on your customers. Who are the most critical customers that you need to try and support through that process? Particularly if it is kind of a life and death situation, or it's a very serious situation, or some regulatory requirement. You really got to understand that customer impact at detail and know how you might need to treat those customers differently through the life of an instance. That's one of the big learnings from my point of view, really understanding the impact on your customers. Lawrence, how has your view of incident response evolved in an AI first world? I know you've kind of, you've talked a little bit about that, but what's really different from your perspective?
So obviously I'm building out this product, the AI SRE product. I think the really interesting thing for me is that there was so much of incident response that used to be this coordination mesh that honestly, you needed a person to try and like work your way through. There's also just like a whole load of stuff that happens in an incident that that needs to happen fast, and it's time consuming, and you want to do it accurately. So often if it is like highly pressured, you end up throwing a load of people at the problem, and it's very divide and conquer and go out and try and do all this working. And it's extremely human intensive. The really cool thing about all of the AI technology that is coming out now and all of the tools that I'm building and other people are too, is that a ton of that work I'm describing essentially like incident high pressured grunt work, searching through tons and tons of data and trying to extract meaning from it. That is like really good for AI. that's like its strength. So for me, what's exciting is I think incidents are extraordinarily stressful. You need to have people in the right place, kind of like always aware, always like alert and following everything. All of that stuff can actually be handled or supported now by a load of the AI tools that you're using. And for me, what that means is like, honestly, it means sometimes you won't need to wake human responders up because you can use the AI to triage before it goes through to a human. That's a great personal win. It means in large scale incidents, you can use an AI to kind of like, you never have to turn up to someone and go, wait, you didn't remind them or you didn't know about that thing. That like the AI can handle it and know about everything that is happening in the incident and notify the people at the right time. And then hopefully you're never going to get into a postmortem and go, I should have really checked that dashboard, or I forgot that thing from the postmortem the other week. Because hopefully with AI, you can actually exhaustively check all this stuff. So for me, it actually poses just like a huge opportunity to improve this stuff and hopefully reduce stress and pressure on people who honestly have hard jobs already.
And I'm experiencing that firsthand because we use Insta.io, and like that visibility into what's going on an ongoing basis is really, really kind of important and game changing. But also looking from a different perspective, if you're running, for example, AI agents for your customer service, customer support operation, what happens if the AI agent goes offline? In our case, 80% of our work is actually handled by Finn, our AI agent. So if Finn disappears for whatever reason, like, yeah, that's impacting your customers, but it's also impacting my support organization as well. Like, that's a major, challenge. And you got to think about it differently than you might have thought about in a world where there was only humans supporting your customers. Because how do you recover from a situation where basically you've lost 80% of your resource capability? So you got to think about, like, how do you automate the recovery? How do you think about redriving, Finn when it comes back again? So even how you respond to incidents in this AI first customer support world, you got to think differently. Like old norms around business continuity planning are out the window. You got to think radically differently. So from both perspectives, AI is actually changing. Incidents for me are now far more critical than they were before, and now we've got AI capability actually helping to manage the incidents in a much better way. So it's kind of a win-win situation. Like we talked a lot about roles, and what happens when an incident occurs. Like there's always this kind of tension around when do you formally declare an incident? Like any guidelines from your point of view? When's the sweet spot? When do you know?
Yeah, so I think I was talking to you about it earlier. It always sounds like a post facto explanation because obviously I work in an incident company, so I'm going to tell you should declare more incidents. I promise you this was a thing that I held to before I joined this company. So I think lots of companies get like really wound up in this idea of I've seen people who have like quarterly reports where they count the number of incidents that they had, and like it's bad if that goes up. But that creates really weird incentives. Like honestly, you don't want someone to avoid creating an incident just because they don't want their number to go up, because that will result in bad things for the company. So we work a lot with our customers to try and like build up a culture of incidents should be really, really easy and non-consequential to declare. So if you think about how our tool works, like we built our tool so that once you're in an incident, you have like superpowers. You have access to now all of the stuff that I'm building. So a machine that's going to go out and crawl all this stuff for you. You have access to all of the integrations that we built into our product. You have access to a centralized place where everyone can go and all this communication is being hoovered up by the AI and presented back really nicely. So the question that we end up posing to people is, would you rather start an incident that turns out not to be an incident, but if it turns out to be really bad, you're in a position where you can easily escalate it to be a serious incident and everything is ready, it's all prepared, all your notes are in one place, and you can turn up and just get going? And the answer is absent hang-ups and cultural issues, it's always that they want to start the incident. So we have various features around that, like triage incidents, where we don't count those towards your initial stats. So you can start an incident and just debug and then escalate it as you go. But the real thing for us is like, the more you make this easy, the more people will do it. The more people do things, the better they get at it. And that means when you end up at really serious incidents, you have a team who are much more trained at using the system than they were before. So hopefully even your larger incidents actually end up getting much better. So like early and often is usually what we say.
No, I like that approach. As you say, you can accelerate the focus on it when you understand the impact. In fact, I worked for a leader, and his big metric was customer lost hours was the metric. So it was really looking at the impact of incidents, and that really kind of, it wasn't the absolute number. It was what was the actual impact is the most important thing. What do leaders underestimate about customer communication during incidents? Because we've talked a lot about their need for communication, but what's one of the big things that we underestimate from a customer perspective?
Yeah, so I think for me, the customer comms, I call it an issue. It's not an issue. It's like a core part of incident response, but it can be really fraught. So there's lots of people with various different like stakeholder requirements when it comes to, are we going to put this on a status page? How are we going to communicate to people? I think for me anyway, personally, whenever I'm advising people in these positions, it is about trying to make sure that you are communicating very clearly with your customers. You don't need to tell customers anything speculative, or you don't need to overshare, but like it's most important that you've turned up and said like, we are here and we are dealing with it and we appreciate it's a problem. Let us know if you find anything. Let us know if you have any questions. And I think that's like the importance of actually just being there, not necessarily telling someone exactly what's happened, is something that I think we often underestimate when you're trying to lead an incident.
Yeah, no, I agree totally with that. And the other thing that I found in terms of customer communications that sometimes, teams involved in incidents don't appreciate that every customer has their customer base impacted in some way by the incident, and they have to make business decisions based on that impact. And if you're not providing them some level of visibility into what's going on, the impact, estimated time to recovery, you're actually hindering them making, what might be a really critical business decision for them in terms of their business continuity plan and how they actually service their customers when there's a major outage. So again, if you're involved in an incident team or customer support organization, don't underestimate the value that communication might actually add for your customer in terms of them making the right business decision. And even that cadence we spoke about earlier, like even if there's a no update, even acknowledging there's no update, but we're still focused on it, is building up a level of trust. And at least, you're demonstrating that you're taking this seriously and you're continuing to focus on it. We've spoken a lot about AI, and I'd love to go a little bit deeper around like, we talk about reducing the cognitive load during incidents on humans. Like, what does that actually tangibly mean? Like, what are the key things that are actually really adding value to the human team that are actually managing the incident?
Yeah, so like we were literally talking about this today, and we're building out these features at the moment. So I think I mentioned earlier that like there's a very common pitfall with an incident where, especially if you're an engineer or you're the first person who gets paged, you turn up at the incident and you're told something has gone wrong and it's really highly pressured. Your initial response is to jump in and try and like debug the situation, which makes tons of sense, right? But if any of you here have done like technical work like that, time tends to pass very quickly and you don't realize quite how fast it's going maybe. And going back to that, like put your mask on first. If you are the first person who's been paged, you're the only one on the scene and you're just digging into stuff relentlessly. You're ignoring all your customer comms. You're ignoring if it actually gets worse. No one at the company knows what's going on, and that's really bad. So one of the things that we really want to enable with a lot of the AI tools that we're building, I think it's not necessarily a bad thing that if you're an engineer, you're jumping straight into trying to debug these things. What I think is bad is if you aren't able to surface or aren't able to do things at the right time. So the things that our AI systems can do is like we have this this desktop app that you can go and install on your laptop that it will essentially just watch the incident channel and it will send you reminders. So it's like ever present, and it will just go, hey, I think you need to send an update, and it's watching the stuff that you're doing as you're debugging the incident, so that it's not just saying, hey, like you should send an update, but it's like, here is the update I think you should send. Do you want to go tweak it or change it? But usually you can just hit send and it just goes back to the incident channel and that's sorted. And there's a ton of other stuff that like organically boils out of how you as an organization run your incidents, like your escalation paths or the rules that you have in your company about who should be notified and when. We can go through all of those and we learn those rules so that if something happens inside of an incident, like maybe you're talking about a data breach and there's customers impacted, and we know from your previous incidents that means like a DPO needs notifying, we can jump in and go, hey, like this is a thing that you need to do. And for me, that's where AI is going to help us massively level this up. for me, it should be possible with all of these AI tools that even someone who is very unfamiliar with your company process should be able to run this incident, and provided that they just do the things that the AI is asking them to do, they should never get to the end of the incident and someone's like, you didn't follow the process, like what happened? Like it should have given you all the cues so that you did exactly the right things at the right time and helped you do them much faster than if it wasn't there.
No, I agree totally. As a key stakeholder in incident management in Intercom, like I love the fact that I'm getting full visibility around what's actually going on in real time. That for me is, definitely reducing cognitive load. I don't have to go and search to find someone to explain. It's actually being, summarized on in real time, even on the incident bridge. Like you're actually getting feedback straight away. You've got a sense of the progress that's being made. You've got a sense of where likely root cause is. You're also getting a sense of, likely recovery path. Like just insights that were impossible to get prior to this without actually interrupting the team that were trying to actually resolve the problem and bring the service back online. So from my point of view, that's been absolutely game changing just in terms of that awareness of what's going on and allowing you then to make right decisions at the right time around how you communicate both to the wider business and to your customers. So definitely AI has been game changing from that point of view, I have to say. Now, obviously, we want AI to take as active a part as possible in any instance, because I think we all acknowledge you can, as you say, look at a lot of data, pull information together, manage the incident from a kind of a sequencing point of view. But where should AI never be the final decision maker?
Yeah, I was thinking about this earlier, and I think as the scope of what AI can do increases, I think we've gone through this stage where adding AI to the mix, often if you added it, it used to result in something that was like below par. It wasn't as good as what your average person would do. I think as the tools are maturing, it's getting to the point where the average AI action is usually a higher level of quality than maybe like your average person if you just pick them, and maybe not someone with training. But when it comes to the stuff that AI should do and the things that it shouldn't, I mean, we think about this a lot. Like we have people who are like, can I wire this up to my Kubernetes cluster or my database engine? Can I have it restart the database? And you're like, well, maybe that's not like a good idea. Like perhaps the human should be in the loop for things like your public status page updates or for turning systems on and off. But I think this is a sliding scale, and it depends on your appetite for risk, your needs, and your trust that you have in the AI, and how much you've learned that trust over actually running it for a period of time.
It's interesting because I think my perspective has moved on a little bit where absolutely, I would have said you always need a human in the loop for the status page update. And yet I still think there's probably a level of a status update that you could automate, even just to inform your customers, hey, we're aware, we're working on it. Like there's certain things that we're doing. Obviously, just probably more detail that you want to provide over time that you probably do need a human in the loop. But it's actually having that confidence that AI can actually deliver a really good status update at the right time, right? That at least gives customers a level of confidence and awareness around, we know there's an incident, we're working on it, we've some idea of the scope or the impact, and here's what we're doing. So yeah, I've actually changed my perspective because a couple of months ago I would have said, no, I'm never going to let AI just make the update. I'm actually there. Yeah, I think, there's certain maybe initial updates I'd be more than happy for AI to automate, once it has the right information, once it's on the right level of due diligence and analysis. So it's an interesting world. I think, perspectives are changing.
It moves very, very quickly.
Yes. Yeah. We talk about building trust through an incident, and very often it's that first communication, which kind of also comes back to, do you trust AI to make the first communication? What do you include in that first update versus what you definitely not include in that first update?
Yeah. So, I mean, firstly, you should never be blaming other people in that first update. I don't actually care if it's AWS who's gone down. Like, I'm paying you for the service. Thank you for letting me know you also pay AWS, but it's just not relevant to me. And actually, the responsibility lies on you to fix it. So, your customers will very, very rarely appreciate a status update that says, it's these guys, and I can't really do anything for you. So, blame is not particularly useful. And then I think speculation. It's often much better for you to lead with customer comms that say, we're on it, we're working on it, please let me know if you have any questions, we'll tell you when we know more, than to try and speculate. Loads of incidents start with, oh God, it's like this thing over here. And if you immediately put that in the initial update and then it transpires that it's not that, then you're not running effective comms and you're not helping people relax. They actually start feeling like maybe you don't have control over the situation or you don't know what's going on. So better to be conservative but present, I think.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think it's really about establishing that first layer of trust, that you acknowledge the incident, you know that it has happened and you're working on it. I think that's the key thing. And I agree as well, like if you're trying to be, too quick off the mark around, I'm actually going to recover it in this amount of time, or here's the precise, root cause, you can lose a lot of credibility when you have to backtrack on both of those, right? And again, anecdotal, I worked for a leader who used to ask one of my engineers for an estimate and how long will it take to resolve this incident. And the engineer said an hour. He'd say to everyone else, it's going to be at least 2 hours. He kind of learned from being burnt all the time around, taking the first estimate as it was never accurate. Obviously, that trust builds up, not at the start, through the incident, but probably more importantly, post the incident and how you share information with customers. And like, what makes a post-incident review, transformative or impactful versus it just being a tick in the box performative action?
So I think we have a very kind of particular customer voice incident, and it's not something that all companies can emulate in this way, but we are extremely transparent about how we work and kind of like the things that we've done wrong. And like we've managed to cultivate enough of trust with our customers and with like our brand that allows us to be really kind of like pull the curtains back and show you what's happening. I think the amount of credibility that we win with our customers when we can produce a public RCA that really goes into the details of what went wrong and is kind of like unashamedly saying, you know what, like we really screwed up here and like this was unexpected and it we had these mitigations, but it kind of threaded the needle through, or it was like a Swiss cheese problem, if you've ever heard of that. I think that stuff is both like engaging to your customer. It shows that you're willing to be transparent with them, which builds up the trust. And hopefully it gives them some type of reassurance that you're like working at their level as well. Like really customers know that these things go wrong, or at least lots of customers do. They have incidents as well. They're not saying necessarily have none, unless maybe you're in a very particular space, but they can be understanding when you have an incident, but it will go so much further if you can actually explain to them, these are the things that went wrong. This is how we ran it. We ran all the proper things. Like we're learning from this. We're hopeful it won't happen again, but ask us any questions. And I think that goes a really long way.
Yeah. I think there's a trend across the industry where companies are actually getting more transparent around exactly what happened. They're willing to share more information around the extent of impact, what they've learned from it, how they're improving on it. I think there's probably two areas where I'd love to see maybe it improve even more. And one is maybe simplifying the message, right? Sometimes we're providing too much technical detail, and I think we can simplify the message. And then also think about the audience. Like very often, a very deep RCA can use very obtuse or technical terms that don't mean a lot to people, right? And very often it's business leaders who are looking at this RCA because they're saying like, my business is impacted. I want to understand what the service provider is actually doing about it. How they've understood the impact and how they're going to improve. So I think there's this kind of know your audience. Maybe you need two versions of a public RCA. Like there's a very technical one for for the technical community, and there's a more business oriented RCA for some of the other key stakeholders in the service that you're providing to your customers. So that's where I'd like to see it improve over time. But I think the transparency that is evolving across many service providers, I think is actually good overall for the industry, and is actually helping build trust and confidence with customers. And part of that, like there is the propensity to damage trust during an incident. How do you go about rebuilding that trust if you have gone down that road? Like what are the steps that you need to think about?
So I think this depends on your context. I think like we're talking kind of like implicitly very much from a B2B context, I think here. But like like if I think about how like we address this or have seen it done well before, really you have to be leaning like pretty heavily on the relationships that you have with those customers. And that is like engaging with your CSMs or the account manager who actually knows the people in that organization. I mean, like all things, never let an argument expand into a Slack thread. That should not be something that you ever allow happen. I think like FaceTime with your customers so that you can properly explain to them what happened is like absolutely crucial. You don't rebuild relationships through text. It just doesn't really work. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think for me, part of it is around closing the loop with the customer. So it's all very well to produce an RCA that says, I'm going to do X, Y, etc. But I think you really have to then close the loop and actually demonstrate that you have done that. And part of that is, hopefully you will never have a repeat of that precise incident, because then that just erodes trust even further. But again, just being able to, say, this was our plan. We've now implemented the plan. We have resolved that problem. Yeah.
We've had some incidents in the past where like we have messed up and we were going to do all these things anyway, but when we've been talking with like some of our key customers who were particularly like, we need to know what you're doing on this, it has been really impactful for us to lay out like the plan of what we're actually doing, and then demonstrating like, if you're like, these are the 10 things that we need to do, and then in 3 days you come back to them and be like, by the way, just to let you know, we've done all of these 9 things and this 10th one is on the roadmap for next quarter. That goes a really, really long way.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. We're nearly close to having to hand over to Eric for the demo, but so I have one last question. What's one habit every leader here should implement before their next incident? Besides implementing incident IO.
I think definitely for like leaders in an organization, I think like when it comes to good incident response, you really need to be leaning on the processes and the people in the team who are there. So I think like one habit that any leader of an incident should practice before the next one is staying out the way.
I love that, staying out of the way. Only being involved at the right time is another way of describing that.
No, I can go with that one.
For me, I think the habit is really around understanding that you don't want to be testing your incident processes and your roles and responsibilities when an incident actually occurs. So make sure that you're regularly road testing, whether it's even a tabletop exercise or simulation. Test the process, make sure it works, make sure people know and understand their roles and responsibilities, and they're not trying to scratch their heads in the middle of an instance. So what exactly am I meant to do right now? I think that's the habit that I think we all need to lean into before the next incident hits.
Questions, anyone? Hi, thanks. So yeah, I kind of maybe have 2 questions. I think one is to Incident IO. I'll leave out the dot. Are you mainly, what's the split, or how does it look like, or is there any difference in B2B versus B2C for you guys?
So honestly, like we have such a variety of the way that people interact with incidents or want to run them. We have like huge customers like Block, for example, or Netflix. But then we also have a ton of customers who are B2B, such as like Intercom as an example. So I think like honestly, the way that it's quite interesting because like different dynamics of the business scale very differently when your customers scale like linearly with the number of employees that you have. And B2C have obviously many, many, many more customers per employee. But honestly, incident response is kind of, it's much more kind of an echo of how you are structured organizationally, internally. So when it comes to B2C or B2B companies, they have different needs in terms of maybe inbound customer support and how they plug that into incidents. But in terms of running them, honestly, they still kind of look like the same business, or they still have very similar processes. So yeah, we just build the product so that we can flex to these companies. And yeah, we have a large mix.
Cool, makes sense. Next one is just wondering, from a value perspective with the integration, I guess what's the value prop with Fin and Incident IO versus other competitors in the incident space?
So I mean, just like
I'm happy, yeah. Or Eric may have some views on this as well, but from our perspective, like, we have a really powerful engine in Fin in terms of being able to take on very complex work and do that on behalf of customers. So it's not just answering informational queries, it's actually carrying out real work. And obviously being able to integrate with Incident IO and really add value through the incident process as well is something where we're actually really demonstrating the value of Fin in what is perceived as quite a complex situation. Something is down, something's not working, and you're trying to provide as much context as possible to the customer. And the procedures piece that Eric demonstrated is kind of a new capability, and I think we're only being scratched the surface of how good that can be. Particularly, I think there's opportunities to really personalize that communication over time to customers using combination of procedures and Incident IO, where as you begin to really understand the impact and the floodplain of impact, you can actually begin to tailor messages to specific customer segments, customer sets, etc. To your point, like, you may have B2B or B2C communities you manage the incident in the same way, but the way you want to communicate with them could be radically different. And again, using things like guidance rules within Fin, audience targeting, again, you can actually really customize how you go out to those customer sets using some of the capabilities of Fin. That's where we think the marriage is really amazing. Yeah.
I will say as well, this isn't something that, like, we are actively building out the AI SRE product at the moment, and I think like I'm personally very interested talking with Intercom about how this works with Fin. But like we have very much envisaged this to, in a year's time, ideally you would be working within Fin. Fin would be collating all of these incoming customer support queries, and they'd be going, this actually looks like it's an incident. And then what Fin would do is it would hand it over to our AI SRE agent, where we would be pulling out all the examples from customer tickets, and we'd be going, cool, well, we have a really comprehensive bug report here, and I know exactly like what browser they're using, and then we kick off the investigation on our side. And I think increasingly you'll see this with these like AI like native tools. You want agents that are specialized to work within the domain that they're in, but then playing really nicely and doing like high fidelity handovers between the two tools. That's kind of the future that I see.
Thanks. My question is more about takeaways for non-technical teams. Like, as an engineering leader, it's very easy for me to just slash Jira, tag Claude and go. But taking your Thomas Cook example, surely there were takeaways for treasury team to manage risk. If it's personnel losing their laptops, that doesn't really translate to like a Jira issue for you to fix it. How does that work with your tools?
So I can go for incidents. So like we have always like built the company with this idea of incidents are for everyone, and we're not deliberately targeted at technical incidents. Now the majority of incidents on our platform do have a technical element, and we go really deep on the technical side of things. But one of the things that like we're very proud of, for example, is our product is used by a really wide variety of people across the organization. So I think like Declan was saying, it's really great to turn up at an incident, like even if you aren't a non-technical person, and just get like a really clear explanation of exactly what's happening, like using AI features that are aware of who you are and what your background is, for example, and can do the translation automatically from like technical elements to focus a lot more on like, I'm going to give you the customer impact first. In fact, I know you're the account manager of this team, and these are the teams that are impacted. So I think having a centralized place to run your incidents that can use these AI tools to adapt to who you are and the personas that you represent is kind of like the future for us.
Yeah, and I can talk to that in real life as well. Like, you're actually capturing not just the technical actions that need to be taken and the technical follow-ups. You're actually able to, capture process improvements that you need to drive, or communication improvements you need to drive, and like they're all cataloged as part of the whole incident IO flow. Like I've been really impressed with the capability of the product. It'll pick up stuff from conversations and kind of flag, do you want me to log this as an action, or you can basically say, I want to make this an action, and I say some of the actions could be technical, they could be process, they could be communications, and you're getting it all cataloged in one place. You're getting all the actions, registered for follow-up, etc. So it's probably the most comprehensive way to manage all of the implications that are happening out of an incident, not just the technical implications.
What would happen if incident IO went down for a business that relies on you guys heavily?
Yeah, that is not good, and that is why I've spent like several years of my life making sure that is like as low probability an outcome as is possible. We often say when we're talking with like engineering candidates, there's various different types of challenge that you join this company for. Some of them are like scalability, some of them are now the AI, but one of them is just honestly reliability. We spend a lot of our time drilling the reliability of the services that we put together. So we like actively load test things. We think very carefully about what would happen if there's a major cloud outage on the stuff that we run. What happens when there's a major cloud outage and honestly all of our traffic like quadruples, maybe 10x's? Like we have to plan for that eventuality so that we're up and continually available. Honestly, the real answer is the guarantee that we give to our customers is we're not going to drop any of the alerts that you send us. If you've sent us an alert and that was something that we should have woke you up, that is something that we go to great efforts to ensure that is always going to happen. Now, obviously humans are fallible and sometimes we do slip up, but like on the whole, we've been greater than 99.99% available. So like you can trust us within like a couple of minutes a month over the last couple of years. And that's hopefully something that we will only drive up as we become more mature.
I think it's one of the reasons why I was suggesting you really need to test your incident processes as well, because as part of those kind of scenario testing, you can actually have a scenario that says, what happens if incident IO isn't there? Like what do we do in that situation? So you can actually think through a lot of these scenarios. While it might be very low probability, you should actually still think about it. Similar in our case, we now have to think about, well, what happens if Fin isn't available for a period of time? How do we handle the volume of work that's coming into us? How do we drive that work through Fin when Fin becomes available again? So we've had to think differently about kind of what I call failure modes or failure analysis. And early in my career, I came across this concept called component failure impact analysis, where you really think about everything that you use to deliver a service, and not just the technical elements, but some of the process elements as well. And you actually think through, what if every one of those particular aspects of the service fails? What do you do? Now, again, you get that down to a real minutia level, like you're talking about, code failure at a kind of a very minutia level. But if you layer it and think about the main components of your service, and if they fail, you begin to think through all these scenarios around, well, what happens if this service fails? What options are open to me? Do I need to think about doing something different to prepare for those scenarios? And that's why, the one takeaway is test, simulate, really think through the kind of failure modes that you're likely to incur. And as you use AI more around whatever your business is, there's new failure modes are going to appear now, because you have a reliance on AI, and what if AI isn't there for whatever reason?
So when it comes to AI, like it sometimes hallucinate and don't give you the best answer. So like I have a question for maybe like AI SRE thing. So when the thing is investigating the issues, like how do you make sure that like it is not hallucinating?
Yeah, I mean, like we have a real challenge, right? Because we have to try and figure out like what is even going wrong. And if you've ever debugged incidents like these before, sometimes even the tools that you're depending on can lie to you. Like someone could have literally just written the wrong thing in a log line that says like I'm up when actually you're down, and then the AI is going to read that and be like, huh? Get very confused. The answer to this is that we have built just as Fin have, we have an extraordinary amount of infrastructure around all this AI tooling. So we grade every single interaction that we ever have with any of our customers using AI. We then aggregate that. We pull down all of the things that we know, say in an incident, if we say that something was true, we wait until the end of the incident, and then we use AI to run through the incident and come up with an idea of what actually happened. And then we go back and retrospectively step through everything we did in that incident, start grading it on accuracy. And then when we've made a mistake, we end up digging into those examples and go, well, actually, like this is a problem with us, or it's a problem with the customer's account, or maybe like we need access to more information through this tool to try and figure out what's going on. But the truth for this is like you just need to measure it, and you need the systems in place to help you catch this stuff.
And I think you also need to think about the quality of information and data sources you're making available to something like an AI SRE. Like you want to make sure that you are guaranteeing as much as you can the accuracy of the information. Like you're not just putting in random data sources that may actually accelerate hallucination. So think about the data sources you're exposing. How good are they in reality? How will they actually aid an AI engine to make the right decision? Yeah.
One thing that you can do is, even if you believe that, like basically imagine that AI eventually can solve all of this stuff. We are at least on the journey at the moment where it can't solve all of them, and it will be fallible in some cases. But that doesn't mean that the AI can't go like half the distance and produce a ton of value in the working that it does up there. So the important thing is, provided that you can give the information back to someone with the citations and exactly where you sourced it from, so that they can go verify, then they can follow the journey of the AI all the way up until the point where they disagree, and then you can make your system steerable so that you can bring it back. But as long as they can follow the breadcrumbs, that's how I do it.
I have lots of questions, but we can take it offline as well. But one of them is the easy one is: are there any industries you cannot serve at the moment? That might be for incident IO. Is that due to security, perhaps, like certain things you're still working on, or can you service anyone, including governments?
So I think we've done all sorts of. We've got a collection of customers across all sorts of industries. The only thing, like, we're not like we've had like US government agencies reach out, and like we're not top FedRAMP certified, but that's a journey that we're on at the moment. But no, like if you're talking about do we serve all different industries, the answer is yes, and everyone has incidents that can be served by the product. If we're talking like legal and regulatory stuff, then I can have a chat after.
Thank you all so much for your time. Thank you again to both Declan and Lawrence for your insights, for a great conversation. Thanks to you all for thought-provoking questions. Let's please continue the conversation outside. Let's please continue the questions. And if you don't get a chance, let's connect on the buzzword of these events. Let's connect on LinkedIn and chat further. Thank you, everyone.